Hi everyone, a community group video update for you. I'm going to do Thessalonians 1 and 2 in this short video, given that some of us didn't meet last week. So I thought you might like to look at the first 2 and a bit chapters when you meet. Chapter 1 of Thessalonians, we meet this idea of a gospel family that celebrate what Jesus is doing. So this whole letter of Thessalonians is an encouraging book, start to finish. It drips with Paul celebrating and encouraging the believers to keep on going in Jesus because Jesus really is worth it. In the first 3 chapters, he celebrates and encourages them, what he sees God doing and how they're growing in their faith, even in persecution. Chapters 4 and 5, he encourages them to keep pressing ahead in the faith in all the bits and pieces of life. And the whole idea is that it's like the Thessalonian church is like a family. Jesus is their brother, God their father, related to one another as fellow brothers and sisters in Christ. So chapter 1, we see the gospel is all about celebrating and encouraging what God's doing in the lives of others. So he says, Paul, at the start, we always thank God for you, continually mentioning it in our prayers. We remember before our God. And he goes on to say what they remember in prayer, and he just celebrates them. And isn't it encouraging to have someone just celebrate and acknowledge what you do? Do we do that for our brothers and sisters? Not for our own glory, not for our own ego, but simply saying, because of Jesus, I can see the change he's making. I can see his grace at work. Let's celebrate that and thank God. And so you notice that Paul does, yes, spend time directing his thanks to God as well as the people because of their faith in him. Chapter 2, we saw Sunday just gone, is that the gospel creates an authentic family. The gospel creates an authentic family. What I mean by that is that Paul's motives for ministry are drawn out in chapter 2, 1 to 16. You see his faultlessness, you see his authenticity, how he acted among them, even in a hostile world. So you notice in verses 1 to 6, Paul's motives. Why did he do what he did? Why did he preach the gospel in Thessalonica? How he did that. A really great few verses to reflect on for our motives. The church and the people in the church have historically done a dreadful job sometimes of their motives for why they're involved in the church. Position, power, privilege, greed, selfishness. People serve in the name of God in horrific ways, and it is ungodly. That is not the picture of a gospel family, a gospel church that these people sometimes create, and it grieves me to see and hear about that. That is not the way that Jesus would have his church behave. Because after all, Paul says that we are approved in God. This approval is the foundation for why we do what we do. Because I'm already approved, in the Greek, the word approved is a perfect passive idea that it's already happened to him outside of him. And that happened to him in a past event in the gospel of Jesus when he believed, and that made him approved before God. And because Paul's approved, he can now be faultless because he's been made faultless. Not perfect. So there's not perfect Christianity. This is simply faultless motives in serving and being involved in the church community, in why you would share the gospel with someone. Then in verse 6 to 12, he talks about not only his motives, but he goes on to say, here's how authentic I am. Here's how I acted among you. Image of families, child, father, mother. He says in verse 8, as kind of the key verse, I think, in this, is we cared for you because we loved you so much. We're delighted to share our gospel and our lives with you as well. And that's the key thing, that Paul's attitude wasn't just, I want to bash you on the head with Jesus, but I want to work hard as a tent maker. I want to proclaim in my whole life with integrity, whether you're watching me or not, who this gospel is, that I'm so holy, righteous, and blameless. Because Jesus made me that. And I want you to be like I am too. In all spheres of his life, he acted that way. And as you read on them, I'm sure each one will stand out for you in a particular different way for your authenticity and motives. And it's just a good way to fine-tune, lift up the bonnet of our hearts and minds and see, Lord, where is it that my motives and authenticity might be off? Where might I not be faithful as I could be because of who you've made me? And let's operate from already being accepted and loved in Christ. Final few verses, 13 to 16. Paul reminds them they're imitators again, just like chapter 1, but this time in persecution. And it's interesting that the reason that they're being persecuted is because the Gentiles, the non-Christian Greek people in Thessalonica, are trying to stop them speaking about Jesus. And that's very much like our culture too. There are Jesus is not a friendly name to view God's, to proclaim God's view on sexuality, gender, identity, refugees, generosity. This is often met with hostile attitudes. People think Christianity is an evil, unkind religion today. And it's not a new thing to think that. We talked a bit about that on Sunday, about how the gospel presents a different story, one of grace, forgiveness, and these ideas of dignity, worth, they all come from God's view of humanity. But our culture has taken God out of the picture and said, we'll take it from here, thank you very much. Instead of seeing the joy and the beauty of the gospel of forgiveness and grace and freedom in Jesus. But those things are available under God, and that's the gospel Paul preaches to them. And so it finishes that you can have an authentic, flourishing life, even if the gospel's silenced from speaking it because of how we live it. And then obviously have boldness to speak Jesus to others too. So that's the message of 1 Thessalonians 1 and 2, that we would be celebrating the wins in one another's lives, that we'd be an authentic, faultless Christian in our motives, even if we suffer. That's just a skimming of the surface. Kick it around in your group more. Pray that you'd be bold and celebrate what God's doing in one another as well. See you next week.